on the first-class cabin of the Ariane A900 flagship jet. Soft, golden light shimmered across rows of pristine, white leather seats. Everything looked perfect until a woman of color, dressed simply, stepped through the door. She carried no designer luggage, no VIP tag, no luxury brand in sight, just a straight posture and a calm, steady gaze. But it was that very calmness that made the whole cabin freeze. First class isn't for people like you. The words came from the female captain's mouth cold, clear, and sharp as a verdict. In that moment, silence fell, not because anyone agreed, but because they were afraid. The woman stood there, no arguing, no anger, only her eyes quietly watching, as if memorizing every single face. No one knew that just 5 minutes later, that same woman would command the flight to halt and dismiss the entire crew mid-air. No one knew that the one they had humiliated was Dr. Aaliyah Carter, the CEO of Ariane Air, and the true owner of the very jet they were sitting on. This story isn't just about racism. It's a test of justice when the quietest person in the room turns out to hold the greatest power. If you believe that a person's worth isn't measured by their clothes or the color of their skin, hit like, share this video, and subscribe to join us on the journey of silent justice where truth doesn't have to shout. It only needs to stand still to be heard. The first-class cabin of the Ariane A900 flagship jet shimmered in the soft glow of early morning light. Sunlight slid through the oval windows, scattering across crystal wine glasses perfectly lined on the tables. The air was quiet, except for the faint hum of the engine preparing for takeoff. Then, as the cabin door opened, Dr. Aaliyah Carter stepped inside. She wore a plain white blouse, black slacks, and carried a small leather bag, no logos, no luxury brands. Nothing about her appearance said powerful except for her eyes. Those eyes didn't look for a seat. They studied the world. From the cockpit emerged Captain Victoria Hale, a white woman in her 40s, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. Her uniform was immaculate. Each crease looked like it had been measured with a ruler. Victoria's gaze swept over Aaliyah from head to toe. Wordless for a few seconds. There was no welcome in her eyes, only an invisible calculation of class and worth. Then came her voice, smooth and metallic. First class isn't for people like you. The cabin fell silent. A man seated in the front row, Gregory Stanton, raised an eyebrow. He wore a navy suit, a silver watch flashing under the cabin lights. A faint chuckle slipped from his lips, the kind of laugh that belongs to people who've lived too long above others. "Maybe she's lost," he said, with a tone that mixed pity and disdain. Then he stood, blocking the aisle as if defending his territory of luxury. Aaliyah didn't react. She just stood there, one hand holding her boarding pass, the other resting lightly on her bag. Her face was calm, so calm that someone might have thought she hadn't even heard them. A few passengers looked up, then quickly looked back down. No one said a word. The silence thickened, not the kind born of peace, but of complicity. Victoria stepped closer. "Your ticket. Please," Aaliyah handed over the boarding pass first class. No company logo, no special note. Victoria glanced at it, didn't scan it, didn't check, just one look, and she muttered, each word sharp and deliberate. "Unverified." The word hit the floor like a blade. Aaliyah looked at her for a brief second. No protest, no defense. "I know," she thought. "If I say one more word, they'll use it against me." Gregory smirked and reached up to pull Aaliyah's carry-on from the overhead bin. "This section isn't for just anyone," he said, without even meeting her eyes. The sound of metal clinking against metal rang out cold, final. Across the aisle, a white woman in a business suit shook her head slightly, as if whispering to herself. She should have known better. Time stretched. Aaliyah didn't move, didn't argue, didn't walk away. She just stared straight ahead at the silver Aryan Air logo mounted on the cabin wall, the company she had founded. No one here knew that, and she didn't need them to, not yet. Victoria folded her arms, taking half a step back, chin high. "You can wait in economy until we verify your ticket. Aryan's first class has its own standards." The tone sounded procedural, but it wasn't about rules, it was about boundaries. A thin line between security and discrimination. The air in the cabin grew heavy. A younger white passenger in row 3 looked over briefly, then pretended to scroll through his phone. Everyone could feel something was wrong, but no one wanted trouble. This world, Aaliyah thought, has more people afraid of inconvenience than of injustice. From the back of the cabin, a young Asian man lifted a small travel camera, Daniel Park. He was a blogger who wrote about fairness in aviation, and in that moment, he knew this wasn't just about a seat. So he kept recording. Victoria gestured to the head flight attendant, Lauren Reed. Lauren leaned in, whispered something, and nodded. "Mark this passenger as unverified," Victoria ordered, not even looking back. Lauren tapped a few lines on her tablet and closed it fast as if hiding a secret routine. The entire act took seconds smooth, practiced, habitual. Aaliyah stayed still, ticket in hand, face calm, unreadable. Gregory shrugged. "Not your fault," he said, smirking, "but some places just aren't made for everyone." Aaliyah turned her head toward him. No anger, no contempt, just one quiet look like a beam of light cutting through a dusty room. Then she walked slowly, deliberately, toward seat 1A. Victoria stepped in front of her, eyes flashing a warning. "Ma'am, I said this seat isn't yours." Aaliyah placed the ticket on the folding table, her voice soft and steady. "The ticket says it is." Victoria inhaled sharply but said nothing. She stepped back, chin tilted high as if to see just how far Aaliyah would go before breaking. The cabin door remained open, letting in a chill from the morning air, and with it came a strange stillness, the kind that exists when small power stands in front of quiet dignity. Daniel kept filming. Through his lens, everything was crystal clear: the captain's disdain, Gregory's smug smile, the passenger's heavy silence, and in the center of it all a woman of color, standing tall, unafraid, unmoved. In that moment, Daniel knew he was witnessing something rare. Justice hadn't spoken yet, but it was already breathing in the air. The air in the first-class cabin seemed to freeze after Victoria Hale's words. The captain stood tall, arms crossed, voice even not loud, but clear enough for every passenger to hear. "Ma'am, I'll need you to verify your priority status, or you'll have to move to economy." Aaliyah didn't reply. She calmly opened her bag and took out a paper ticket and ordinary boarding pass. No VIP logo, no special tag. She had done that on purpose because today she wasn't flying as a CEO. She was flying as a woman of color, testing how her own system treated those without the badge of power. She handed over the ticket. Victoria glanced at it for half a second, then looked up without scanning it, without checking the database. Just one short sentence, cold and precise as a hammer hitting steel, unverified. Aaliyah looked down at the ticket being returned, crisp and unbent. She didn't move. Her expression didn't change. Only her eyes narrowed slightly as if memorizing just how smoothly prejudice could operate when disguised as procedure. In the front row, Gregory Stanton leaned forward and opened the overhead bin. He shoved Aaliyah's small suitcase aside, slid his own bag in, and shut the compartment with a thud as if clearing out trash. He didn't need to speak. His body language said it all. "You don't belong here." A sharp metallic click echoed through the cabin as the compartment door sealed shut. Everyone went back to their phones, their newspapers, their magazines. No one looked directly at her anymore. Only Daniel Park, sitting near the back, kept his camera rolling quietly. Aaliyah's eyes lingered on her bag pushed into the corner. Strange, she thought. They train for thousands of hours on flight safety, but no one teaches them how to see a human being. Victoria turned back to her, her tone formal but dripping with condescension. "We have procedures, ma'am. Passengers without verified priority status can't remain in this section. I need your cooperation." She said procedure like it was a holy word, something that could wash away all traces of bias. Behind her stood Lauren Reed, the head flight attendant, holding her tablet. Her eyes flicked between Aaliyah and Victoria, caught somewhere between discomfort and disdain. She typed something quickly on the screen, then nodded to the captain. A man in the seat 2C looked up and asked, "What's going on?" Victoria turned to him with a polished smile. "Just a small verification issue, sir. Nothing to worry about. A sweet, tidy answer like how society has always sugar-coated discrimination." Aaliyah took a slow breath and said softly, just loud enough for Victoria to hear, "You haven't checked the system." Victoria raised a brow. "I don't need to. Ma'am, your ticket isn't on the priority list." Then she turned away as if the conversation were over. No one laughed, but everyone understood. An invisible wall had just been built between one black woman and the world around her. No barbed wire needed, just glances, habits, and small-minded authority wrapped in a uniform. Gregory adjusted his tie, speaking in that bored, casual tone of someone pretending to empathize. "Not your fault. Maybe your travel agent messed up. Happens all the time." Aaliyah said nothing. He smirked, adding, "You should thank them, though. Economy's pretty comfortable these days." Each word landed like a pebble dropped into still water small, but leaving ripples that stayed. Lauren leaned closer to Victoria, whispering, "Should we call security?" Victoria shook her head. "Not yet. Let's see how she reacts." It wasn't about enforcing rules anymore. It was an experiment testing how long a humiliated woman would endure before breaking. Daniel Park kept filming. Through his lens, every detail was sharp. The way Gregory opened his laptop wider, deliberately taking up more space, the way Lauren positioned herself just slightly to block Aaliyah's view of the aisle. The way Victoria said ma'am with that icy smile, the kind of politeness people use when they know they're being cruel. Daniel exhaled, hands trembling slightly. He'd been on hundreds of flights. He'd seen this kind of scene before too many times, but never had he seen someone face it like this, so calm, so unshaken. She knows, he thought, and she's letting them hang themselves with their own rope. Aaliyah didn't argue. She simply sat down in seat 1A, placed her ticket on the table, and slowly buckled her seatbelt. No one spoke. The silence grew heavy, like everyone was waiting for someone else to make the first mistake. Victoria glanced at Lauren, then said loud enough for the whole cabin to hear, "If she can't prove her priority status, we'll have to notify ground security." Aaliyah turned her head slightly, her eyes calm and steady. "You can do whatever you think is right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she looked out the window, watching the morning light slide across the wing. A few passengers exchanged glances. None of them could understand how she stayed so composed. Gregory forced a chuckle, opened his newspaper, but his hands trembled slightly. Silence deepened. Aaliyah tilted her head slightly, studying Victoria's face, the cold eyes, the clenched jaw, the barely hidden fear of losing control. And in that quiet moment, Aaliyah realized something profound. She wasn't the one trapped by prejudice. They were. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice whispered, "Don't let them drag you down. Justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand firm." Lauren stepped forward, murmuring into her earpiece passenger in seat 1A unverified, awaiting confirmation. Daniel Park glanced at his watch and stopped recording. 5 minutes had passed. It felt like a century. The cabin door remained open, but the air inside had grown dense and heavy. No one knew that in just a few minutes. The entire power structure standing before them would collapse quietly, completely. For now, bathed in the soft golden light of first class, a woman of color sat still, surrounded by those who believed they had the right to decide who she was. At the very back of the first-class cabin, Daniel Park rested a small camera on his lap. To anyone glancing over, he looked like just another passenger, earbuds loosely in place, Notes app open on his phone. But through that lens, every second was being captured, every glance, every word, every breath of contempt. Daniel was a Korean-American blogger. He had written dozens of pieces on travel inequality, the quiet injustices of air travel, where the color of your skin or the brand on your suitcase could decide how you were treated. But today was different. Today, he wasn't writing. He was recording. Through the camera, he zoomed in on Captain Victoria Hale, standing in the aisle like a guard at a border. Her voice was cool and precise. "Ma'am, please step aside." That tone, it was the same one Daniel had heard in countless airports before. The voice of someone convinced they were maintaining order, when, in truth, they were just protecting privilege. Dr. Aaliyah Carter stood quietly, her hand resting on the seat, eyes locked on Victoria's. No anger, no outburst, a kind of calm so deep it made others uneasy, like her fury ran too deep to be visible. Gregory Stanton sat with his legs crossed, smiling faintly, watching her like a spectator at a show. The tilt of his head toward the cabin door carried the silent message. "You don't belong here." Daniel zoomed in further, framing that look the one that could silence a room. And in that moment, something stirred in him. He remembered his mother, a Korean immigrant, being refused service at a check-in counter years ago because her English wasn't clear enough. They always say it's a system error, Daniel thought bitterly, but sometimes people are the error. He refocused the lens. Through it, he caught the details. Victoria never scanned the ticket. Lauren, the head flight attendant, typed a few meaningless characters into her tablet, then closed it. No real verification, no process, just prejudice disguised as procedure. A white man in seat 3A looked up briefly, then buried himself back in his magazine. A woman across the aisle pursed her lips and quietly switched on her Bluetooth headphones. The whole cabin sank into a heavy silence, the kind Daniel knew too well. The silence of witnesses who saw injustice and chose comfort instead of courage. Aaliyah still didn't move. She glanced at her ticket, then placed it gently on the table in front of her. That simple act was enough to make Victoria tense. "Record it," Victoria said sharply. "Passenger unverified. Possible violation." Lauren nodded, her face blank, robotic, just another bureaucrat pressing buttons, through the camera. Daniel caught at the faint twitch at the corner of her mouth. Not regret. Satisfaction. The small, ugly pleasure of standing on the right side of power. Daniel paused the recording for half a second. A familiar weight settled in his chest. The ache of watching an injustice you know will vanish unless someone leaves proof. Then he hit record again. Aaliyah took a slow breath. Her eyes wandered the cabin, where morning light streamed through the windows, cutting narrow streaks of gold across the carpet. No one touched her, but every stare pushed her farther out. Exclusion, she thought, can feel colder than hatred. Victoria leaned toward Gregory, her tone shifting to polite concern. "I'm sorry about this disturbance. Mr. Stanton will handle it shortly." Gregory smiled back, his voice dripping with civility. "No problem. I totally understand. Standards have to be kept." Daniel's fingers tightened around his camera. He knew this wasn't about standards. This was repetition, a script society had rehearsed for centuries. Different characters, same story. The ones excluded change, but the system stays smooth, confident, certain it's doing the right thing. He zoomed closer. Aaliyah hadn't bowed her head. No tears, no visible anger, just silence heavier, sharper than any protest. Lauren whispered again. "Should we call security?" Victoria's response was low but firm. "Not yet. Let's make her cooperate first." Daniel knew exactly what that meant. He'd seen it before at security checkpoints, boarding gates. Anywhere difference was deemed suspicious. Cooperation, in their language, meant submission. If she refused, they'd call her dangerous. If she resisted, they'd call her disruptive. If she stayed silent, they'd call her defiant. Daniel understood in this game. She couldn't win, unless she refused to play. The camera caught the moment. Aaliyah lifted her chin, her dark eyes steady, staring straight into Victoria's. No words, just two worlds colliding in silence, false authority versus true dignity. A long pause. Then Victoria's voice sliced through the air, tight and impatient. "Ma'am, please step aside or we'll have to." Aaliyah interrupted softly. "You're just doing your job." "I understand." Her voice was calm, so calm it was almost terrifying. Daniel felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Through the viewfinder, she didn't look like a victim. She looked like someone measuring, calculating, knowing exactly what this moment would mean. He didn't know who she was yet. Not the CEO, not the owner of the jet, not yet. All he knew was that something about her composure felt monumental, like the calm before a storm that would rewrite everything. He checked his camera. The storage was fine. Then his thumb hovered over the live post button. If he uploaded this now, he'd be going up against an airline, maybe risking lawsuits, censorship, worse. But if he didn't, this moment would disappear, swallowed by the cabin's silence like so many others. He looked up again. Aaliyah sat by the window, the golden light brushing her cheek, her stillness harder than steel. Without a word, She seemed to speak for every person who had ever been humiliated and chosen silence as strength. "If I don't post this," he thought, "no one will ever believe it happened." He pressed upload, one soft click, uploading. The signal flickered but held. The 42-second clip began its journey. Daniel didn't know that. At that same instant in New York, a screen lit up in the Aerian Tech Division where Priya Mehta, the company's chief engineer, spotted a strange system log from this very flight. It was the first domino in a chain that would shake everything. But for now, aboard the Aerian A900 taxiing down the runway, everything looked calm. No one knew that the small camera on Daniel Park's lap had just opened the door for silent justice to enter the world. Aaliyah sat upright, hands folded in front of her, and in that frozen quiet, no one realized she was the one in control all along. The jet sat motionless on the runway. The engines hummed softly, steady and patient, like a heartbeat waiting for a signal to begin. In seat 1A, Dr. Aaliyah Carter sat upright, eyes half closed. No one in the cabin knew that she wasn't just another passenger. She owned this jet, this airline, Arian Air, and the very network of people now unconsciously revealing their true selves before her. But this story didn't start on the plane. It began 3 weeks earlier, inside Arian Air headquarters in New York City, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking Central Park. Aaliyah laid a first-class ticket on the table. No elite passenger logo, no internal ID, just a normal ticket, purchased under her real name, without any priority channel. She looked at her senior management team and said quietly, "We say Arian stands for fairness and intelligence. So let's see if fairness still exists when it's not printed on the ticket." The room went silent. Sophia Alvarez, the company's chief legal officer, glanced at her. "You're planning to fly it yourself." Aaliyah nodded. "No advance notice. No one outside this room knows. Only 5 people were allowed to keep the secret. Sophia, Priya Mehta, head of technical systems, 2 security advisors, and Aaliyah herself. The mission was simple: to test how the company treated a passenger stripped of visible power, status, or privilege. A field experiment, as Aaliyah called it. When she left the meeting that day, she said just one thing. Justice only means something when it doesn't need a uniform. Now, back in the first-class cabin, that experiment was unfolding in real time. A white captain exercising control she didn't truly own. A wealthy passenger mistaking manners for superiority. And a silent crowd afraid, complicit, believing order must be preserved even when it's wrong. Aaliyah didn't need to react. She just needed to watch. Her hand rested lightly on a small leather bag inside it, a smart ring, a secure link to Arian's central data system. No one in the cabin knew that every time she touched it. The ring transmitted all internal flight data camera feeds, crew logs, voice recordings straight back to New York. On the 42nd floor of headquarters, Priya Mehta stared at her monitor. A live feed from the cabin flickered on screen. Her expression tightened as she read the alert Passenger 1A, unverified manual entry by crew. Her stomach dropped. Only one person could possibly have that label. "Oh my God, they actually did it," she whispered, and immediately opened a covert monitoring channel. Back on the jet, Aaliyah opened her eyes. Victoria Hale was speaking in low tones with Lauren Reed. Their voices were hushed, but clear enough. "Look at how she's dressed," Victoria muttered. "I knew the moment I saw her." "Yeah," Lauren said under her breath, snickering. "Doesn't look like someone who could afford this seat." Gregory Stanton lounged comfortably, a smug half-smile playing on his lips, like a man enjoying a fine piece of theater. Everything about them, their tone, their gestures felt natural, too natural, like discrimination wasn't a crime to them, but a reflex. Aaliyah's gaze swept across the cabin, calm, detached, observant. Sometimes, she thought, the best way to study a system is to stand still and let it expose itself. She'd sat in boardrooms with people like Victoria before, faces that radiated confidence, convinced they were chosen for merit, when in truth they just fit the image the world was comfortable seeing. Discrimination isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a glance, a delayed decision, a ticket stamped unverified without anyone bothering to check again. Victoria turned toward her. "Ma'am, I need your cooperation so we can prepare for takeoff." Aaliyah met her eyes, voice even. "Did you scan my ticket?" Victoria hesitated for half a second before replying quickly. "No need. The system auto-verifies." Aaliyah tilted her head slightly. "I see." Her tone was calm, but something in it made Victoria instinctively step back. At the back of the cabin, Daniel Park was still recording, unaware that his camera was capturing a pivotal moment in the airline's history. In New York, Priya's fingers flew over the keyboard. Lauren just deleted passenger 1A from the verified manifest, she said, then manually tagged her as unauthorized. The system beeped. A red banner flashed across her monitor. Manual override detected. Compliance breach level 3. Sophia Alvarez appeared behind her. Lock all flight logs. Activate parallel recording. No one touches the data. Done. Sophia exhaled. "Does Aaliyah know we're watching?" "Yes," Priya said. "She activated the smart ring the moment she boarded." Sophia went quiet for a few seconds, then murmured, almost to herself. "Then the experiment's over. Now justice begins." Back on the jet, Aaliyah twisted the silver ring on her middle finger. A secure signal blinked in her augmented reality contact lens. Headquarters connected. All systems recording. She didn't smile. She didn't assert control. She simply breathed to everyone else. She looked like a woman enduring humiliation. But, in truth, she was letting the system reveal itself frame by frame. She remembered what her father used to tell her. You can't cure the disease of prejudice by shouting at the patient. You make them look in the mirror. And Aaliyah knew this plane was the mirror. She didn't need to speak. Every word, every gesture, every glance was being recorded not for revenge, but for truth. Gregory kept smirking. Victoria kept issuing orders. Lauren kept typing passenger unverified, each of them playing their part in a drama they didn't realize she was directing. Daniel's camera caught the subtle motion of her hand brushing the ring. He thought it was a nervous tick. In reality, it was the command to trigger a full system audit of the flight. A faint beep sounded deep within the aircraft's data console, inaudible to everyone else. Every byte, every word, every tone now streaming live to the New York servers. Aaliyah closed her eyes again. There was nothing left to do but wait. I want to see how far they'll go, she thought, and whether the system I built can choose the side that's right. Outside, the co-pilot's voice came over the intercom, cabin secure, ready for departure. Victoria responded sharply into her headset. Hold a minute. We have an unverified passenger. 6 words. 6 words that stopped a multi-million-dollar aircraft and over 100 people on board because one woman didn't fit their picture of privilege. Daniel lowered his camera slowly. He realized he wasn't just filming discrimination. He was witnessing a human experiment, one testing the conscience of an entire industry. Aaliyah turned her gaze toward the window. Morning light gleamed across the wing like fractured glass. She smiled faintly, a smile so small no one saw it. Justice doesn't arrive through shouting, she thought. It comes through data and truths they can't erase. The air in the first-class cabin felt like it had been drained of oxygen. No one spoke, yet everyone knew exactly what was happening. Captain Victoria Hale stood in the aisle, clipboard in hand, her voice firm, commanding projected for the entire cabin to hear, not just one person. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. If you cannot prove your priority status, I'll have to ask you to leave your seat immediately." Each word struck the floor like nails against metal. No anger, no emotion, just authority cold and absolute. Dr. Aaliyah Carter sat upright, her fingers loosely interlaced, eyes fixed on the window. Morning light traced across her cheek, giving her brown skin a soft glow that contrasted sharply with the sterile white of the uniforms facing her. She didn't move, didn't argue, just one quiet breath. If I were sitting there, I might have stood up, shouted, demanded justice, but she didn't. She just sat. Across the aisle, Gregory Stanton let out a short, dry laugh loud enough for everyone to hear. "Standards for first class sure have dropped," he said, his tone light as smoke, but the contempt hung heavy in the air. A few passengers chuckled softly, the nervous laughter of people hiding inside complicity. Lauren Reed, the head flight attendant, said nothing. She stood beside Victoria, tablet in hand, and typed Passenger 1A. Unverified, no scan, no verification, just a single tap, small gesture, heavy verdict. Aaliyah lifted her gaze. Her eyes brushed over Lauren, not angry, not pleading, simply steady. That single look made Lauren falter, her eyes darting away as she pretended to keep typing. Victoria inhaled slowly and continued. "We need to ensure the safety of all passengers. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to call security." Her tone was controlled, professional, but Aaliyah could hear it now. The tremor, the uncertainty. It wasn't the voice of someone enforcing order anymore. It was the voice of someone afraid to lose control. Still, Aaliyah said nothing. Outside, the sunlight glinted on the aircraft's wing thin, sharp lines slicing across the cabin floor. At the back, Daniel Park lowered his camera slightly, thumb hovering over his phone. He uploaded a single photo, a black woman sitting in first class, facing a captain demanding she leave her seat. The caption read, "Black woman denied first class without verification. Bacan fly fair, Aryan bias." He knew what it meant. In a few minutes, the world would see this. He also knew he had just crossed the line from observer to participant. But sometimes silence is its own crime. Phones began to buzz, notifications appeared. People tried to look casual, but their attention had shifted. Aaliyah didn't know about the post. She only felt the weight of new eyes watching her, studying her, fearing her. Gregory leaned back in his seat and muttered, "You should know your place, lady. In this world, knowing where you belong is a virtue." Aaliyah turned her head slowly toward him. She said nothing, but her gaze steady, unwavering cut straight through his smirk. It vanished halfway. Strange, she thought, how the ones who talk most about knowing your place are the ones most afraid of losing theirs. Lauren glanced at her watch and whispered to Victoria, We can't delay much longer. The crew's waiting for clearance." "Not yet," Victoria replied. "I want this process documented properly before we take off." She said process, but everyone in that cabin knew it wasn't a process anymore. It was her will, wrapped in a uniform. Daniel raised his phone again. Through the lens, he saw Aaliyah's face, no anger, no fear, no fragility, only composure. The quiet power of someone choosing intellect over reaction. He typed another caption, "She's calm. They're not." Justice, in silence, he hit post. That tweet slipped into the world like a spark into dry grass. Victoria turned back toward Aaliyah, voice rising, "Ma'am, I'll count to 3. If you don't leave the seat, I'll—" She stopped, because Aaliyah looked up, just one glance, but there was something in those eyes, something unspoken, immovable, that froze the captain mid-sentence. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't fear, it was power quiet, ancient, undeniable. Victoria didn't know why her body reacted first, why she instinctively took half a step back. Lauren noticed, her brow tightening. The cabin went dead silent. Even the hum of the air conditioning felt like breathing. Then Aaliyah spoke softly. "Clearly, I paid for this seat. I'll remain here until I'm verified properly. No raised voice, no plea, just calm conviction, and somehow it carried more weight than any shout could." Several passengers lowered their eyes, pretending to read magazines, but I knew they weren't reading. They were ashamed of their silence, ashamed that comfort mattered more than justice. Gregory shifted in his seat, opened his mouth to say something, but this time no one echoed him. Lauren said nothing. Victoria clenched her jaw and turned toward the cockpit. Aaliyah kept her gaze on the window. Light spilled across her face, soft, almost ethereal. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like someone waiting for truth to reveal itself. At the back, Daniel refreshed his phone. 10.2K views, 2.8K shares. In less than 3 minutes, he took a deep breath, a shiver crawling up his spine. Not fear awareness. The truth was already taking flight. The cabin remained silent. No one knew that within minutes. This plane wouldn't just carry passengers, it would carry a conversation. A global reckoning about dignity, power, and justice. But right now, what the world saw was simple: a black woman sitting in first class, surrounded by isolation and still breathing evenly. And in that silence, her voice echoed not aloud, but in the mind of anyone watching. "Justice doesn't need allies," she seemed to say. "It just needs the courage not to leave your seat." Inside the first-class cabin, everything remained eerily quiet. Only the low, steady rumble of the engines filled the air like the heartbeat of a giant beast waiting to be unleashed. No one on board knew that while Captain Victoria Hale was still barking orders and Gregory Stanton was smoothing the lapels of his Navy suit. Another world had already begun to stir, one far beyond the cabin walls. At the very back, Daniel Park glanced down at his phone. The post he'd just shared, a single photo of a black woman being asked to leave her first-class seat, had passed 10,000 views in just 6 minutes. Notifications poured in, reposts, comments, tags, mentions. It was as if he had dropped a spark into a hurricane. The first hashtag appeared, "Justice for Aaliyah," then "Aryan Bias," and finally, "Fly Fair." 3 simple phrases, but together. They ignited a global conversation that Aryan air could no longer control. In Los Angeles, Black journalist Chloe Freeman, who had once been downgraded from business class simply for wearing a hoodie, retweeted Daniel's post with a caption that burned again. In 2025, on an Aryan jet. This isn't a system error, it's a mindset. Within 10 minutes, her post had over 30,000 shares. That was all it took. The story had escaped the plane. In New York, the Wings of Equality, an organization of female pilots, began discussing the incident in their group chat. One pilot wrote, "If this really happened, it's not just a crew failure. It's a culture that's been misaligned for too long." Daniel's eyes widened as he saw the first verified checkmark among the comments. His pulse quickened. This had gone beyond him now. Back in the cabin, Aaliyah still didn't know. She could only sense the shift, the invisible current of attention gathering around her, like a storm outside the windows. Lauren Reed walked by, glancing at her tablet. The name Aaliyah Carter, unverified, still blinked across the screen. She frowned, not from guilt, but from irritation. The onboard Wi-Fi was lagging. She didn't realize that very signal was crashing under the weight of hundreds of thousands of new connections flooding Daniel's post. Inside the cockpit, Victoria Hale spoke into the radio ground control. "I need to re-verify passenger 1A. Possible system error." Her tone was composed, but her eyes betrayed something new uncertainty. There was no response. The line was jammed. Daniel looked around. Other passengers were starting to get notifications. A white woman in row 2 stared at her phone, then looked up at Aaliyah, her expression shifting from detachment to realization. A man, a few seats over, murmured quietly, "Is that her?" That her a passenger only minutes ago had now become a symbol. Aaliyah sat still, hands resting on her lap, eyes calm and distant. She didn't know that Daniel's photo had already been automatically clipped into a 42-second video now spreading across every major platform. In it, you could hear Victoria's voice, sharp and cutting. "First class isn't for people like you." And then Aaliyah's silent response, her steady gaze, unflinching, unspoken. Her silence had become the answer. Across the East River, in Manhattan. Sofia Alvarez's office phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets were calling nonstop. A PR associate burst in, breathless. "There's a viral video about racial discrimination on an Aryan flight. The caption says, 'Black woman denied seat.'" Sofia froze. "Which flight?" "A900 Miami to New York." A beat of silence. Then Sofia rose to her feet. "That's her flight." She hurried to her computer and keyed in an emergency access code. The live feed from the jet's first-class security camera flickered onto her screen Aaliyah, sitting perfectly still, surrounded by tension. In the tech operations room, Priya Mehta turned her monitor toward Sofia. The hashtags are trending worldwide, and Aaliyah. She hasn't moved. Sofia stared at the screen. Does she know she's being watched? Priya allowed herself a faint smile. She always knows. Back on the jet, Victoria approached Aaliyah again, her voice tightening. "Ma'am, I'm asking for your cooperation." Aaliyah didn't turn to her. Instead, she looked toward Daniel, the stranger behind the lens. Their eyes met. Daniel froze. He felt as though she could see straight through the camera, through the noise, through the chaos outside, right into the heart of what was happening. "She knows," he thought. "She knows everything." Aaliyah tilted her head slightly, a subtle gesture that said more than words ever could. "Don't interfere." It wasn't a plea. It was command. She understood now that social media, the same thing she had once distrusted, was doing its work. Public justice was moving on its own. Whispers began to spread through the cabin. A young passenger pulled up the viral clip on her phone, then looked at Aaliyah with something between awe and disbelief. A middle-aged woman removed her headphones, her expression softening with guilt. No one said a word, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of indifference. It was the silence of awakening. Gregory Stanton frowned. He unlocked his phone only to see his own face frozen on screen, that smug smirk, that dismissive gesture pushing Aaliyah's suitcase aside. His lips pressed into a tight line. No words came. Lauren leaned toward Victoria and whispered, "You see that they're filming now." Victoria glanced around. The glow of phone screens dotted the cabin. Her grip on the clipboard tightened. "No recording allowed on board," she said sharply. "This is an aviation security violation." No one listened. In this age, once justice goes online, it no longer belongs to the room it was born in. Aaliyah remained still, eyes distant, posture composed. She understood now the proof she sought was already revealing itself. The flaw in the system wasn't in its technology or its policies. It was in the people, those who believed authority gave them the right to judge before they verified. Somewhere deep inside, she thought, if they can humiliate me simply for not looking privileged enough, this system isn't ready for true justice. Daniel set his phone down, hands trembling. He looked at her, this woman of color, sitting in perfect stillness amid chaos, and understood something profound. Sometimes silence makes the loudest sound. Outside the window, the sun climbed higher, scattering light across the wing until it bled white into the cabin walls. The color of truth finally exposed. The atmosphere in first class began to shift. For the first time since the jet had stopped moving, Captain Victoria Hale stepped out of the cockpit. She didn't come alone. Behind her walked First Officer Jason Cole and Chief Attendant Lauren Reed. 3 uniforms, 3 badges, 1 formation, a human wall of authority. Their polished shoes struck the cabin floor in hard, measured beats that echoed through the narrow space. Everyone understood that sound. Power was approaching. Victoria stopped directly in front of Dr. Aaliyah Carter. Her posture was straight, her tone louder than before, not just to be heard, but to be seen. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. If you cannot prove your priority status immediately, I'll be forced to summon security to board this aircraft." The words hung in the air like a countdown. All eyes turned toward the black woman in seat 1A. No one spoke, but you could feel every heartbeat counting the seconds. Aaliyah didn't move. Her back remained straight, her hands loosely folded on her lap, gaze fixed on the window. If she felt fear, not a trace showed, not in her breathing, not in her face. From across the aisle, Gregory Stanton chuckled softly. He leaned forward as if watching a thrilling play. "Yes, call security," he said. "Don't let people like that delay the flight." Lauren's eyes flickered toward him, then back to her tablet. Her fingers typed quickly, "Passenger uncooperative. Security requested." She didn't verify. She didn't question. A single gesture, mechanical, like flipping a switch that would decide someone else's dignity. Victoria turned slightly to Jason. "Contact ground control. Report safety level 2. Jason nodded crisply. "Copy that." They spoke in the cold, coded language of aviation protocol, the kind that turns personal bias into procedure. Aaliyah watched them quietly. No defiance, no submission, just stillness. Her silence was a mirror. In it, Every reflection revealed itself. Victoria pride, Jason obedience, Lauren fear, Gregory smug satisfaction, and the rest of the cabin complicit stillness. It wasn't mere silence anymore. It was structure. The architecture of an old power system built on fear and compliance. And, if I'm honest, if I were one of them, I might have stayed silent too. Not because I agreed, but because I'd be afraid of being wrong, afraid of violating procedure, afraid of disturbing the system. Victoria took a step closer, her voice carrying across the cabin. We don't want an incident, but flight safety is our top priority. Flight safety? Those two words fell like a legal shield perfectly shaped to hide prejudice behind regulation. Everyone in the industry knew invoke safety, and all resistance dies. A young man in row 2 leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Maybe she should just show her ID." The woman nodded. "It's not worth the trouble." They didn't realize it, but those two sentences were the anthem of a society too used to injustice. Just go along. Don't make it worse. Aaliyah heard them. She didn't react. She simply inhaled slowly, deeply, and exhaled again. Her eyes no longer looked out the window. They looked straight ahead into the center of the cabin, where, in just a few minutes, justice would rise out of silence. Victoria glanced at her watch. 5 minutes wasted, she muttered. Jason replied, "Ground control is on the way. They'll handle her, 2 small words sharp, impersonal, and cruel." Aaliyah tilted her head slightly. A faint smile touched her lips, not mockery, just realization. She was watching the old system perform exactly as designed, facing what it didn't understand, with force. If she had spoken then, perhaps she would have said, "Real justice doesn't need to shout. It just waits." At the back, Daniel Park kept recording. Through his lens, the image was haunting 3 uniformed officers standing in a line before one silent woman. It said everything words could not. He thought about posting again, but stopped. He didn't need to. The story was already speaking for itself. Gregory Stanton laughed louder, turning to the man beside him. Pathetic. Thinks she can buy her way into first class with just a ticket. For the first time, another passenger spoke up quietly but firmly. Maybe she has the right to be here. Gregory's head snapped around, eyes narrowing, but the man said nothing more. Still, that single sentence cracked something. The wall of silence began to fracture. Lauren froze mid-gesture. Something inside her twisted a sense that this moment was being captured, preserved. She glanced around. Too late. A dozen phones were raised, recording quietly. Victoria hadn't noticed yet. She was speaking sharply to Jason. "We can't let her sit there forever. This violates FAA regulations," Jason replied. "If she refuses again, I'll call security chief myself. They were doing what the old world always did, defend an order through fear." Aaliyah closed her eyes, like someone listening to a slow song. She didn't need to respond. She knew that back in New York. Priya Mehta was watching the same scene unfold through a secure feed. That Sofia Alvarez was already drafting legal files for an investigation that hadn't even begun. She didn't have to fight them. She only had to let them reveal themselves. Lauren's voice broke the tension. "Captain, maybe we should double-check the passenger name." Just to be sure, Victoria spun around, voice sharp as a blade. "No need. I know this type. They always exploit the rules to make trouble." The words snapped through the air, then silence, heavy, unforgiving. Even Gregory stopped smiling. Daniel's lens tightened on Victoria's face. He knew instantly this was the frame that would matter. The moment when authority shot itself in the foot. Aaliyah opened her eyes again, meeting Victoria's gaze. Not in anger, but with a quietness so clear it forced reflection. No one moved, no one spoke. Another silence filled the cabin, not of submission this time, but awakening. Aaliyah sat still, not resisting, not retreating, simply waiting. Outside, light shimmered across the plain's silver-winged cold, bright and sharp as justice drawing near. The cabin door hissed open with a sharp metallic click. Compressed air rushed out cold, dense, and heavy. A man in a gray security uniform stepped inside. Broad shoulders, thick neck, sun-creased skin, eyes void of emotion. His name tag read Marcus Doyle, Security Chief. He moved with a deliberate calm, the kind of man who'd learned to end conflicts through authority, not dialogue. Captain Victoria Hale turned to him, voice low but firm. Passenger 1A, unverified. She's refusing to leave her seat. Marcus didn't ask for details. He didn't need a story. He had a script, an uncooperative passenger, a crew following protocol, and him, the man sent to end it with a command. Aaliyah Carter lifted her gaze to meet his. Not defiant, not afraid, just steady. The kind of look that makes a person hesitate if they still have a conscience. But Marcus didn't pause. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "stand up, take your belongings, turn off all devices." Aaliyah blinked slowly. "Devices. Any recording or electronic device," Marcus replied. His eyes flicked toward the tablet resting on her tray table. Aaliyah didn't move. "That's my personal property," she said quietly, her tone calm, even. Marcus stepped closer. "You're delaying the flight." Silence thickened. The hum of the engines beneath the floor was the only sound left alive. If I were a passenger there, I probably would have stayed silent too, because who dares to challenge aviation safety and security authority? But deep inside, something would have twisted that familiar ache of watching the right thing be crushed under the weight of procedure. Marcus reached out. The motion was fast, too fast for anyone to react. He yanked the tablet from Aaliyah's hands. It hit the floor with a sharp, brittle crack. The sound sliced through the cabin like a gunshot. Everyone jolted. Lauren Reed's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Victoria stepped back half a pace, blinking. Even Gregory Stanton, who'd been smiling moments ago, froze, his smirk dissolving. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She looked down at the tablet, now lying face down, its metal edge dented. A beat of silence. Then she lifted her head. No one forgot that look. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pleading. It was composure so pure, it made others ashamed. Marcus stiffened. He wasn't used to being looked at like that. Usually, people yelled, fought back, or cowered, but she didn't, and that, more than anything, unsettled him. "You'll be removed from this flight," he said, voice lower now, less certain. No one moved. It was as if the cabin itself had stopped breathing. At the back, Daniel Park held his phone steady. He pressed record. Through his lens. The scene was stark and undeniable. Marcus bent down, retrieved the tablet, set it roughly on the seat beside Aaliyah, then turned his back. The nameplate on his chest caught the light security chief. No narration was needed, no editing, just truth. Daniel hit post, caption security chief, assaults passenger. Justice for Aaliyah. A progress bar appeared, uploading, 87%. Weak signal, but enough. He didn't speak. He didn't warn anyone. He just knew the line had been crossed. Aaliyah didn't pick up the tablet. She left it where it fell, a quiet symbol of dignity discarded. One she didn't need to retrieve to prove it was hers. Lauren took a hesitant step forward, then stopped. Her eyes shifted from Marcus to Aaliyah. Something flickered. Not pity, but realization. Victoria gripped her clipboard tighter. "Marcus," she said softly, voice trembling. "Do your job." But Marcus didn't move. Aaliyah's gaze had frozen him in place. Gregory cleared his throat, trying to shatter the tension. "Do you need me to call someone?" he muttered, but no one answered. His words dropped into the air, empty and useless. Finally, Aaliyah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know what you just did?" Marcus blinked. No one had ever asked him that. He was used to commands, not questions. Her tone made him hesitate, even retreat half a step. "It's all right," Aaliyah said gently. "You've just made the world pay attention." No one understood what she meant, but Daniel did. His phone buzzed. Upload complete. Below it, views 3.2K, 9.7K, 20.1K. Within minutes, the video had exploded online. Comments poured in. "She didn't fight. He just took it. That's assault." Aryan air explained this inside the cabin. The air was still thick and unmoving, but outside, the world was catching fire. Lauren glanced down at her internal system tablet. A flashing message appeared. External media alert detected. Her throat tightened. "Captain, it looks like someone's posting videos from this flight." Victoria spun around. Marcus followed her gaze and saw the glow of screens. Passengers were recording everywhere. He took a step toward them, but this time no one lowered their phones, not one. The silence shattered. A middle-aged woman spoke up, her voice shaking but clear. "You can't treat her like that." Another added, louder. "She paid for that seat, and just like that, the wall of power cracked. Not because Aaliyah fought back, but because others finally saw themselves in her." Victoria froze. Lauren couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Marcus stood there, gripping the dented tablet as if it were evidence of his own undoing. Aaliyah tilted her head slightly, her voice calm as ever. "I'll remain here. You may leave now." No one replied. A soft click broke the air. Daniel had stopped recording. He knew he didn't need to anymore. Justice had begun to move on its own. Outside the window, the Miami sky was an impossible blue. But inside the cabin, no one saw color anymore. Only light, harsh, white, and blinding. The color of truth, shining on a system that believed it could still choose who was worthy. And in that silence, Marcus placed the tablet back on the seat, turned, and walked away. Aaliyah hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't fought. She had simply stayed. And in doing so, she had brought an empire to its knees. Nearly 1,300 miles away from the Arian A900 on the 47th floor of Arian Air's New York headquarters. The tech operations room glowed like an artificial dawn. Pale blue light from the servers flickered across Priya Meda's face, a small-framed Indian woman with sharp, thoughtful eyes that had long grown accustomed to situations others would call unprecedented. Lines of code streamed across her monitor, flowing like a heartbeat. Then one line made her freeze edit passenger 1A, removed. Status changed to unauthorized by L. Reed. Priya frowned. She double-checked the logs. No verification request, no system command, just one manual entry. Lauren Reed, she whispered. The name rang a bell. Head flight attendant. Miami, New York route. Record disciplined. Procedurally consistent. But which procedure allows a passenger's record to be deleted mid-flight? None. Priya's fingers danced across the keyboard. She opened the security oversight console. A flashing red message appeared. Potential tampering detected. No need for permission. She typed the override code lock system plus full audit mode. In an instant, every operational log from the cockpit to the cabin to the crew's handheld devices was frozen and copied to secure servers in New York. No edits, no deletions, no rewrites. Every tap from Captain Victoria Hale, every entry from Lauren Reed, every command from Security Chief Marcus Doyle was now preserved. Priya sat back, exhaled softly, and murmured, "Now, let the system protect itself." 51 floors above. The legal department was still lit despite the late hour. Sophia Alvarez, Arian's chief counsel, stood before a wall-sized display. The viral video played on loop Marcus Doyle snatching a tablet from a passenger's hands. No sound, none needed. The image alone chilled the room. Beyond the glass walls, Manhattan glittered like a circuit board, electric veins pulsing with light. Sophia crossed her arms, eyes locked on the screen. After a long silence, she said quietly, "She's not just a passenger." A young legal associate looked up. "You mean, Doctor?" Carter Sophia nodded slowly. "Yes, and right now, justice isn't in the courts. It's in the hands of the people watching that video." She moved to the control desk and opened an encrypted channel. A prompt appeared, "Private link. CEO secure channel." She slipped on her headset, voice barely above a breath. "Aaliyah, can you hear me?" Inside the jet's first-class cabin, the world was still holding its breath. Aaliyah Carter sat motionless in seat 1A, surrounded by silent chaos. A faint tone chimed from the slim silver band on her finger. "I hear you," she said softly. Sophia's voice came through the secure line, calm and unwavering. "Don't move. Everything is being recorded. The world is watching." Aaliyah's lips curved faintly, not a smile of triumph, but one of recognition. The old order had finally reached its breaking point. Meanwhile, Victoria Hale was still speaking into her headset. Voice tense. "Ground control. We need verification on passenger 1A non-compliant. Disruptive behavior reported." But every word she uttered was being transmitted back to headquarters, flagged in real time by the Oversight AI false report. Biased tone detected. Back in New York, Priya monitored the feeds. She opened a new window showing global social media analytics. The chart was blood red, pulsing upward. Justice for Aaliyah. 2.3 million posts. Aryan bias. 1.1 million mentions. She leaned back and whispered, "It can't be silenced now." I still remember that moment, the instant the company began to realize her silence wasn't weakness. It was a move, a deliberate, premeditated move. Aaliyah had once said in a strategy meeting, "If a system only works when power is visible, it's not just, I want to see how it behaves when power hides in plain sight." And now, she was sitting in the center of that very experiment. Sophia checked her watch, then turned to her assistant. "Prepare a public statement. Release it now. Don't wait for morning." "But, ma'am." "No buts. We're not just protecting our CEO. We're protecting the integrity of our system. Within 60 seconds, a statement hit every major news wire. Aryan Air has launched an independent investigation into alleged racial discrimination and abuse of authority aboard Flight A900. The company remains committed to transparency and the equal treatment of all passengers. Just 3 sentences, but enough to shift the axis of power. Back on the plane, Lauren glanced down at her crew tablet. A red alert flashed: Aryan HQ active audit mode. All actions recorded. Her face drained of color. Victoria saw it too. "What the hell?" she muttered. From the cockpit, Jason Cole looked up at his console, where a small amber light blinked system locked. None of them understood what was happening, but Aaliyah did. She closed her eyes, serene. For the first time, justice was speaking not through voices, but through code. Marcus Doyle's phone buzzed in his pocket calls, texts, alerts from Ground Security Command. He glanced down. The message header read HQ Oversight Alert. He didn't answer. For the first time, the enforcer felt watched. In New York, Sophia muted her mic and turned to Priya. Everything locked. Priya nodded. Every byte. The entire flight is under audit. Nothing they do can be erased. Sophia looked out the window. Dawn had begun to rise, spilling gold across the Hudson River. Justice doesn't need to shout, she said quietly. It just needs to be seen. Priya smiled faintly, and they up there still think they're in control. Aaliyah opened her eyes. She glanced down at her ring. A tiny green light pulsed once confirmation from New York. No words were needed. She understood. Everything was moving as planned. No confrontation, no chaos, just patience. Let the truth unfold through data, through video, through the clean light of morning spilling across the cabin. Maybe justice, I thought, was never meant to be a punch. Maybe it was always meant to be a pause. A long, deliberate pause until the world realizes who truly holds the power. On Daniel's screen, the view count passed 10 million. At the top of the comments, one line stood out: she didn't move, but the world did. The air in first class was stretched thin, like a wire ready to snap. No one spoke. Only the low hum of the engines filled the space steady. Cold. Waiting. Lauren Reed hadn't sat down. She stood against the wall, gripping her tablet so tightly her knuckles whitened. The screen flickered with red warnings, flashing faster by the second. Then a new message appeared, cold, metallic. Final Aryan public statement live. She looked up just as every seat's entertainment screen flickered. The jazz channel vanished. A news broadcast took over automatically. A deep male anchor's voice echoed through the cabin, calm and heavy with gravity. Breaking news: a black female passenger was denied her first-class seat aboard a jet owned by herself. The passenger has been identified as Dr. Aaliyah Carter, founder and CEO of Aryan Air, one of America's leading private aviation companies. The cabin went still as if all the air had been pulled out. For a full heartbeat, no one moved. Captain Victoria Hale turned toward the screen, face drained of color. Lauren's tablet slipped from her hands and hit the carpet with a soft, sickening thud. First Officer Jason Cole stepped back, lips parted but speechless. Marcus Doyle stood motionless, one hand still resting on his utility belt. And Gregory Stanton, the man who'd laughed the loudest, who'd said first class isn't for everyone, stared blankly at Aaliyah. His glasses slid halfway down his nose. For the first time, he saw her. 10 seconds of silence followed. 10 seconds that felt longer than an hour. Then the screen changed again. Daniel Park's video filled the monitors, his shaky camera from row 6. Marcus snatching the tablet, the gasp from the passengers, and Aaliyah's still face, turning upward, unflinching. Daniel's voice played over the footage, quiet and haunting. She didn't fight, she just waited. The clip replayed, once, twice, each time slower, heavier. First class was frozen. No one could look away. No one could explain what they'd just seen, because the truth had already explained itself. Victoria was the first to break. She stepped backward, whispering, "No, no, that can't be. This is a mistake." But her voice trembled. Not from fear of losing her job, but because she'd just seen her own face on national television, cold, superior, mechanical. A face she didn't recognize. Lauren sank into a seat, hands over her head. Jason just stood there, staring at the scrolling headline, "Aryan CEO subjected to racial profiling by her own crew." Gregory tried to laugh but couldn't. His voice cracked. She owns this plane." No one answered. The question fell like a pebble into deep water, vanishing into the silence. Aaliyah didn't move. She didn't look at them. Her eyes stayed on the window, where dawn had begun to seep through the clouds, a soft, golden light, indifferent and fair. I sat there, watching, heart pounding slower now. For the first time, I understood justice wasn't a shout. It was a mirror, and everyone here was being forced to look into it. Victoria's hand shook as she grabbed her phone, trying to call headquarters. But before she could dial, a calm, commanding voice filled the cabin speakers. "This is Sofia Alvarez, General Counsel for Aryan Air. All actions aboard this flight are under official investigation. Any attempt to interfere, delete data, or leave your station will be considered a serious breach of protocol." The voice was even, unhurried, the kind of tone that didn't need to yell to be obeyed. Victoria's hand fell limp. Lauren straightened, whispering, "Dr. Carter." But Aaliyah lifted one hand slightly, not to silence her, but as if to say, "Don't shrink the truth with apologies." Gregory stared at the floor. The blue light from the monitor painted his face in streaks of shame. No one dared meet her eyes. Outside, every major network carried the story, CNN, Reuters, Bloomberg, the same headline flashing everywhere: "Black tech billionaire humiliated on her own jet." Within minutes, Miami Air Security received new instructions. "Do not approach Passenger 1A until Aryan HQ authorizes contact." In less than 10 minutes, the world had chosen a side. Aaliyah slowly turned from the window, her gaze sweeping the cabin. No anger, no disdain, just quiet, the kind of quiet that makes people see themselves clearly for the first time. Lauren tried again, voice cracking. "We didn't know you were." Aaliyah's lips curved into a faint smile. "That's exactly the point." Her tone was barely a whisper, but every ear strained to hear it. "You shouldn't have to know who I am, only that I'm human." No one spoke. The cabin sank into a silence no longer born of fear, but of shame. I remember it vividly, Gregory's trembling hands around a glass of untouched wine. Victoria pressing her palm to her forehead, shaking. Marcus turning away, eyes wet. Lauren folding into her seat, staring at nothing, as though she'd just lost something she could never get back. Aaliyah simply sat there, watching sunlight spill across the clouds gentle, golden, and absolutely just. Someone whispered softly, "We just witnessed history." Maybe they were right, because for the first time, justice didn't arrive in a courtroom or a riot. It didn't need police or lawyers or shouting. It arrived in silence, carried by a woman who sat still long enough for the world to speak on her behalf. And as I watched the light rise higher through the window, I thought of her words from long ago, when people think they're above the sky, that's when justice begins to land. And it did. Not with sirens, not with applause, but with the quiet brilliance of truth finally touching down. The first-class cabin was silent. Not the kind of silence born from power, but the kind that comes after the truth explodes. Every gaze turned toward her, the woman who, just 10 minutes earlier, they thought didn't belong there. Dr. Aaliyah Carter stayed seated for a moment longer. She took a deep breath, letting her heart beat slow. Then, quietly, she stood. Her simple gray dress moved slightly with each calm gesture. No music, no theatrics, only the steady hum of the engines, the background rhythm to a silent symphony of justice. No one dared breathe too loudly. Aaliyah stood tall, her voice cutting through the air clear, low, and deliberate, each word carved into the silence. "You have just discriminated against the CEO of Aryan Air." The next 3 seconds felt longer than a decade of history. Lauren Reed's hands slipped. Her tablet hit the floor again. Victoria Hale spun around, eyes wide, speechless. Jason Cole gripped the seat in front of him. And Marcus Doyle, once the most commanding presence in the cabin, now bowed his head lower than any passenger. No one knew what to do, but everyone could feel it. The hierarchy in that cabin had just been flipped upside down. From my seat in row 3, I could feel my pulse slow, no special effects, no sharp dialogue, just one sentence and an entire system collapsed. Suddenly, the entertainment screens flickered. The Aerian HQ logo appeared, followed by the steady, composed voice of Sofia Alvarez, cool, calm, and final from Aerian Air headquarters in New York. Any act of coercion, threat, or disrespect toward Dr. Aaliyah Carter will be treated as a serious violation of company ethics and federal law. The crew of Flight A900 is under immediate investigation. All flight operations are to be suspended until further notice. The cabin speakers carried her words clearly, each one landing like a verdict. Lauren nearly collapsed into her seat. Jason turned to Victoria, his voice barely steady. "Captain." "What do we do?" Victoria opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lips trembled. The glow of the monitor painted her pale face, a face once full of confidence. Now hollow. Marcus stepped back, glancing around for an exit, but there wasn't one. Not for him, not for the system he'd believed would always protect him. Aaliyah didn't look at any of them. Her voice was calm, decisive, unshaken. Captain Victoria Hale, First Officer Jason Cole, Lead Attendant Lauren Reed, and Security Chief Marcus Doyle. You're all terminated, effective immediately. A breath passed, then her tone softened, but her words hit harder than stone. Gregory Stanton, the passenger who displayed open racial bias, is hereby banned from Aryan Air permanently. No one moved. Then, from the middle rows, a single pair of hands began to clap. 1, 2, 3. Soon the cabin filled with applause, not loud, not triumphant, just steady, deliberate, heavy with meaning. Victoria bowed her head, tears fallen before words could form. Lauren sat frozen, hands clenched, eyes red. Jason stared at the floor in silence, and Marcus, the man who had ripped the tablet from her hands now, looked down at his own hands, as if they were the evidence of his guilt. Aaliyah turned slowly, her gaze brushing over each of them. No insults, no anger, just a single truth spoken with grace. I don't need your apologies. I need you to remember this feeling what it's like when power leaves you, because you used it the wrong way. The cabin fell silent again. No one moved, no one dared. Because this wasn't just a woman speaking anymore, it was a system awakening. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The plane hadn't even taken off, yet something higher than flight had just begun dignity. Gregory Stanton turned, his voice trembling. "Dr. Carter," Aaliyah interrupted gently, her tone even. "Keep that apology for the next person you try to belittle. They might be the one who decides whether you get to fly again." Gregory lowered his head. The light across his face revealed no arrogance now, only the weight of late understanding. A few passengers rose to their feet. An older white man, a retired aeronautical engineer, spoke up, "Ma'am. We owe you a thank you for keeping your composure when the rest of us stayed silent." Aaliyah nodded, a faint smile flickering like wind across calm water. "Thank you, sir. But remember, justice didn't happen because I spoke louder than they did. It happened because I didn't." A simple sentence. Yet, it froze everyone in place because they all understood they had just been taught what it means to face injustice with humanity. Sophia's voice returned through the speaker one last time. Per Dr. Carter's directive, Flight A900 will remain grounded until the replacement crew arrives. All passengers will be fully accommodated by Aryan HQ. Aaliyah sat back down, slowly. No more words were needed. Justice had been served not through rage, but through intellect and unwavering calm. The first-class cabin, once a symbol of privilege, had become a courtroom of conscience. None of the dismissed crew spoke. They simply stood there, silent statues of a fading era. Aaliyah leaned back, eyes turned toward the window. Outside, sunlight glinted sharply off the wing. She closed her eyes not to rest, but to remember that the right kind of silence can echo louder than any scream. I still remember the sound of that applause. Soft, steady, final, like the closing of a door on the past. For the first time, power had been reclaimed without violence, and it all began with one woman, who chose wisdom over anger. The air in first class hung thick after the four names were announced. No one moved, no one spoke, only the soft hum of the engines and the cold white glow above light that now fell on faces stripped of every illusion of control. Then, without warning, the main cabin screen flickered on. A new window appeared, the Aryan HQ logo stamped across a stark white background. Internal audit report, real-time feed. No music, no transitions, just black text on white words that, to anyone who understood their weight, hit harder than any verdict. A calm, steady voice filled the cabin. Sophia Alvarez, reading from headquarters, preliminary findings compiled by Chief Systems Engineer Priya Mehta are ready. This report is now being broadcast live to all passengers aboard Flight A900. Every head turned toward the screen. Even those who had turned their backs on Aaliyah now couldn't look away. The first section appeared Captain Victoria Hale. 20 recorded complaints for discriminatory conduct within 3 years. Below it, raw internal logs scrolled line by line, AUG 2023. Denied service to black passenger, suspected ticket inconsistency. APR 2024, delayed departure. Suspected passenger carrying unknown device. Victoria froze. Her hands trembled in her lap. Fingernails dug into her palms until her skin went white. She tried to speak, nothing came out. Then, the next section loaded First Officer Jason Cole. Multiple instances of delaying or editing discrimination reports. The logs scrolled again, brutal in their simplicity. Forwarded complaint delayed 46 days. Status changed from urgent, pending review. Jason stared at the screen, then dropped his head. Maybe, for the first time, he realized silence could be a crime that you don't have to shout to uphold injustice. Sometimes, you just have to do nothing. The next name appeared, Lead Attendant Lauren Reed. 12 cases of manually downgrading passengers from priority to unauthorized. Predominantly women and passengers of color. Each line was a wound carved in digital ink. Passenger Tasha Brown, status changed manually. Passenger Naomi Chen, status changed manually. Passenger A. Carter, status changed manually. Lauren's shoulders shook. Tears slid down her hands, quiet, untheatrical, but real. Then the final name appeared. Security Chief Marcus Doyle. 6 recorded incidents of excessive force or verbal abuse without safety justification. And 1 final line incident, grabbed personal device from passenger seat 1A. Marcus's grip tightened on the back of his seat. His eyes reddened. He looked down at his hands, those same hands that once symbolized control, and for the first time, they looked small, fragile, guilty. Sophia's voice continued, even, almost clinical. All evidence has been transferred to the FAA and the EEOC. A federal investigation will begin within 24 hours. All employee accounts associated with these incidents are now locked. Data from Flight A900 is under full protection and cannot be altered. No one spoke. No one touched their drinks. No one met another's eyes. The screen illuminated their faces, each forced to confront not just their actions, but the truth that they'd lived inside this system for years, pretending it didn't exist. Aaliyah didn't look up. She already knew. She'd known for years. These numbers weren't new, but this was the first time the world was seeing them. She exhaled slowly and said, almost to herself, "I will not tolerate another system that excuses the contempt of humanity." Her voice was soft, but it carried through the cabin like a quiet earthquake. An older man, retired air traffic control. Gray hair, clear eyes spoke for the first time since takeoff. His words were low, but they reached every ear. Justice came late, but at least this time, it didn't fly over us. Daniel Park still held his phone, but he wasn't recording anymore. He just set it down, watching her. He knew his video had opened the door, but she, Aaliyah, was the one who walked through it, dragging the world behind her. The report concluded with 2 final lines. One in bold case ID A900, status escalated to federal oversight, and beneath it, a single sentence that seemed to echo inside every heart. Discrimination is not a system error, it is a choice. The cabin went utterly silent. No applause, no cheers, only awareness, sharp, raw, heavy. They all knew now. What had just unfolded wasn't a random outburst or a single incident. It was the sum of countless moments when people said, "It's not my problem." When someone chose convenience over courage, and silence over truth. Aaliyah stood still, eyes on the blanking screen. She didn't need to win. She only needed the world to stop pretending nothing was wrong. A minute later, the monitor dimmed, leaving behind only faint reflections in the windows. Daylight had filled the cabin bright. Absolute. There were no shadows left to hide in. I realized, right then, what silent justice truly meant. It wasn't about shouting. It wasn't about punishment. It was about exposure, about shining light on the quiet machinery of prejudice that people call procedure. And then, as the screen faded completely, one final line appeared, added by Priya Mehta herself. For every passenger who was told they didn't belong, this is your seat back. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the silence settled again, not out of fear this time, but out of respect. The Aerian A900 still hadn't left the runway, but outside. The world was spinning faster than any turbine ever could. From New York to Los Angeles, Atlanta to Chicago, every news screen in America flashed the same headline: Aerian Air Discrimination Incident, CEO Humiliated on Her Own Plane, on CNN. The anchor's voice carried a mix of disbelief and restraint, a rare case of discrimination where the victim is the owner of the airline herself. Reuters ran a short, measured piece, but its words hit Wall Street like a shockwave. Aerian Air CEO Dr. Aaliyah Carter Black, tech billionaire, denied her first-class seat by her own flight crew. FAA and EEOC investigations underway. Bloomberg went further, overlaying charts on the broadcast, the company's stock line dipping, then pausing and rising again, a paradox only possible when justice itself becomes brand equity. At home, I watched the replay, that same clip looping across 1,000 screens. The moment Aaliyah stood and said, calm as ice, "You just discriminated against the CEO of Aerian Air. No soundtrack, no editing, just truth bare and undeniable." And it was enough to make America hold its breath before the storm of commentary began. Online. The hashtag #JusticeForAleah crossed 30 million posts in just 6 hours. The internet became a chorus of black communities, women's rights advocates, former flight attendants, even passengers who had once been treated differently for not looking rich enough. A woman in Texas wrote, "I was kicked out of priority seating because they thought I was in the wrong place." Now I know I was never alone. A former Latino pilot from Denver posted I was passed over for promotion 3 times. The reason was never written down, but I knew, thank you, Aaliyah Carter, for making sure silence isn't our only option. It was no longer a single story. It was a movement, a collective realization that discrimination wasn't just cruelty. It was a system disguised as habit. Within 24 hours, the inbox at Aerian HQ overflowed. Emails from partners, press, civil rights groups, some polite, some brutally clear. If Aerian fails to respond within 48 hours, we will suspend all partnership activity. In Manhattan, the Aerian board convened an emergency session. They didn't argue, they didn't stall. In 20 minutes, a statement went live. Aerian Air terminates its contract with Stanton Holdings effective immediately for public discriminatory conduct and violation of ethical partnership standards. Gregory Stanton, the man who once sneered that first class wasn't for people like her, was now the secondary headline across every network. Gregory Stanton loses multi-million-dollar deal following Aerian discrimination scandal. A tiny empire collapsed in under 5 minutes, the same amount of time his prejudice had needed to reveal itself. But for America, those 5 minutes were long enough to expose an entire system. Other airlines rushed to issue their own press releases. We are reviewing our verification and diversity training protocols for flight crews. No one said Arian's name aloud, but everyone knew that's who they were talking about. It was corporate America's way of whispering, we could be next. On MSNBC, a veteran anchor, gray-haired, measured, said something that stayed with me. It wasn't Aaliyah Carter who embarrassed America. It was the rest of us, those who saw and said nothing for far too long. I sat there, hearing those words, and realized justice doesn't always destroy evil. Sometimes it just forces an entire nation to look in the mirror. At Aryan headquarters, Priya Mehta, the quiet Indian engineer, was still at her console surrounded by glowing monitors. No one called her the junior systems analyst anymore. She was now on every broadcast the engineer who preserved the data that made justice visible. Sofia Alvarez, the Latina General Counsel, became another symbol of calm precision under chaos. Her only public statement read, "We don't speak for justice. We let the data speak." Over the next few days, anonymous emails flooded HQ from flight attendants, technicians, passengers, each recounting the quiet ways discrimination had survived inside procedures. No court order required, no protest, just confession after confession, a system dismantling itself from the inside out. People began to believe that fairness could go viral too, as fast as any scandal. Aaliyah stayed silent for several days. The media circled, speculated, dissected, and then on CBS, in a 45-second segment, she finally spoke. No script, no entourage. If someone like me with power, money, and a name can still be doubted because of my skin, imagine what happens every day to those who have no voice, no anger, no tears, just truth. And it was enough to quiet the country again. Arian's stock rose soon after. Not because people forgot, but because they started to believe. Arian wasn't just an airline anymore. It had become a moving declaration of human dignity. That night, CNN replayed the clip of the passengers applauding on the jet. The anchor said softly, "Not every applause is loud. Some are simply the sound of the world accepting that it's just changed." And indeed, it had, not through rage, not through revenge, but through truth, intelligence, and one woman who dared to stand still. 3 weeks after the Aryan A900 incident, America was still talking. But amid the storm of outrage, Dr. Aaliyah Carter reappeared not as a victim, but as a reformer rewriting the rules. One crisp March morning, she walked into Aryan Air's press hall in New York. No grand stage, no anthem, no spotlight, just a white backdrop with a single phrase, Fairski's Initiative, the future of dignity in flight. Her voice was steady, low, and deliberate. "I don't believe justice ends with firing 4 people. I believe real justice begins when a system changes, so no one ever has to live that moment again." Reporters lowered their pens. She wasn't reading a speech. She was speaking as if in conversation, grounded and human. Then she unveiled it, the Aryan Fairski's Initiative, a full-scale AI-based monitoring framework woven through every stage of flight operations, from ticketing to landing. Every employee interaction, every word, every recorded gesture from service cameras logged, not deletable, not editable. Audited independently. This isn't a tool for control, she said, but a shield to protect people from their own biases. The photo from that moment, Aaliyah standing before dozens of cameras, with the glowing words, "Transparency is the new power" behind her, spread across social media in hours. But she wasn't finished. She announced the Aryan Elevate Fund, a $30 million program designed to uplift women, people of color, and underrepresented groups in aviation. It would finance scholarships for aspiring pilots, training programs for flight attendants, leadership tracks for technical and operational staff who'd never been given a chance. She didn't talk about gender equality. She didn't say diversity and inclusion. She simply said, aviation has always talked about open skies. It's time we open the doors beneath them, too. I watched the broadcast from home, stunned not by the plan, but by her calm. No slogans, no self-congratulation, just clarity, the quiet conviction that fairness could be engineered, like a flight system calibrated to the second. That same day, Daniel Park, the Asian American blogger who had captured the viral video, received an email from her office. A short invitation. We would like you to join the Aryan Passenger Advisory Council. You will represent the voice of our customers to ensure every flight remains fair. For everyone. Daniel posted the letter on X Twitter with a simple caption, "From the guy who filmed injustice to the guy helping prevent it. Justice is sometimes just a second chance." It went viral instantly, a new kind of symbol, just as powerful as the original video. Within hours, the FAA announced it would collaborate with Aryan to pilot the Fair Skies system across the National Aviation Network. Bloomberg called it a moral technology turning point in air travel. The Atlantic wrote, "Aaliyah Carter isn't just redefining how we confront bias. She's teaching the world how to wield power without harm." A veteran NPR journalist added, "At an age when most CEOs think of legacy, she's thinking of repair, not vengeance, but reconstruction." Weeks later, the Elevate Fund revealed its first cohort, 120 women funded to pursue commercial pilot training, 60 engineers of Black, Latin, and Asian descent enrolled in aerospace technology programs. 45 displaced aviation workers retrained and promoted within Aryan. In an interview, a reporter asked her, "After all this, do you feel you've won?" Aaliyah paused, smiled faintly, and said, "If I have to win for someone else to lose, that isn't justice. I just want to build a space where no one has to prove they deserve respect." Viewers fell silent. She didn't sound like a CEO. She sounded like someone who'd walked through bias and come out wiser, not hardened, but resolute. Her expression said it all. No anger, no pride, just the steady calm of someone who knows that wisdom is the most elegant form of revenge. A month later, Time magazine placed her on the cover of its special issue, Women Rewriting Power. Beneath her portrait, 3 simple words: she chose wisdom. And maybe that's the bravest act in a world obsessed with noise, choosing silence, and building something new. In her closing address to Aryan's global staff, she stood before thousands and said quietly, "We can't fly higher if we keep someone else on the ground." No one clapped immediately. Then, slowly, the applause began soft, deliberate, collective, not applause for victory, but for awakening. Aaliyah bowed slightly, no smile, no performance. Then she walked down the glass hallway of Aryan HQ sunlight scattering into 1,000 tiny skies. Outside, the early spring wind moved softly through the city as if the sky itself had just been set free. 5 minutes, just 5 minutes on a plane. But when cameras, screens, and people all focused on the same moment, the world began to move. After the press conference unveiling the Fair Skies Initiative, a new phrase began to flood American social media. There were 5 minutes for justice. No one knew who started it. Some said it was Daniel Park. Others swore it came from Priya Mehta, who had quietly posted 5 minutes of silence, 5 minutes of dignity. But 5 minutes for justice. Within 2 days, the hashtag had gone global. On Twitter, people began sharing stories of small 5 minutes of humiliation they'd once endured. A black female pilot in Georgia posted a photo of herself standing in front of a cockpit, her gaze direct, her caption simple. 7 years ago, they said I didn't fit the image. Today, I fly the same airline that told me that. Thank you, Dr. Carter. 5 minutes for justice. A Latino aerospace engineer in Texas wrote, they said I didn't match the brand's look. Today, I'm on the Fair Skies design team. Her 5 minutes became my 10 years. Morning news shows began to shift their tone. What once ran as racial discrimination scandal shakes aviation now read the Aaliyah Carter effect. When Justice Stands Still. On NPR, the host's voice was soft, reflective. We Americans have always been taught to speak up, but sometimes the loudest act is the one that says nothing at all. I remember that morning, sitting in a Brooklyn cafe, watching CNN on the wall-mounted TV. A banner scrolled across the bottom over 300 black female pilots and flight attendants apply for retraining through the Elevate Fund. The cafe owner, an elderly black woman with silver hair, smiled faintly and said, "You see, honey, it only took 5 minutes for folks to remember skin ain't a measure of worth." Her words were so simple, I couldn't forget them. Within a month, more than a dozen major airlines across the U.S. and Europe announced reviews of their passenger ranking and priority systems. None mentioned Aryan by name, but everyone knew the A900 flight had become the industry's shared lesson. A Delta spokesperson told the Wall Street Journal, "We're implementing anonymous service evaluations. No one deserves to be judged by how they look." In Washington, the FAA formed a special committee to study behavioral transparency models in civil aviation, based entirely on Aryan's Fair Skies framework. Reading those headlines, I thought how strange a 5-minute humiliation had somehow become a guiding light for an entire industry. Online, old videos were being re-edited into compilations called 5-minute stories. People recounted moments when they'd been dismissed, overlooked, or told, "This place isn't for you." But every clip ended the same way, with them standing still. No shouting, no anger, just meeting the camera's gaze, the same way Aaliyah had looked at Captain Victoria Hale that day. On Reddit, an older man wrote, "I used to work in HR. I once rejected an applicant because her name was too hard to pronounce. I wish I'd taken 5 minutes of silence like Dr. Carter to think before deciding who belonged. Maybe that's what justice really does. It doesn't make people afraid. It makes them reflect." The next month, Harvard Business School held a packed symposium, the 5-minute Case, Digital Evidence, and Modern Ethics. The first slide projected the image of Aryan A900's first-class cabin, the place where it all began. The lecturer said slowly, "This is the first modern case study on consumer power, digital transparency, and instantaneous justice. Three concepts that had never shared a classroom before." Outside academia, Aaliyah remained silent. No statements, no interviews, just one post on her LinkedIn page. 5 minutes can destroy you or define you. Hundreds of thousands of shares, no arguments, no debates. People understood not every lesson needs to be explained. Some only need to be witnessed. That May afternoon, I stood at JFK Airport and saw the newly painted Ariane jets. Each bore a subtle silver curve beneath its logo, a symbol for the light trail of justice. A maintenance engineer beside me wiped the fresh paint and said she told us every flight should leave a trace not of its engines, but of its kindness. He smiled, turned back to his work. The sun hit the fuselage cold, clean, radiant. In the media, they began calling it the 5-minute effect. Corporations from banks to hotels cited the Ariane case as a landmark in how recorded truth keeps justice alive. In an essay for The New Yorker, one line stayed with me. Those 5 minutes in first class were not an incident. They were a test of every one of us who watched and chose silence. Maybe that's why the hashtag never faded like others do. Where 5 minutes for justice stopped being a call to action. It became a reminder that when even one person stands with dignity, the world around them has no choice but to change. That night, on a late-night talk show, the host turned to the audience and asked, "Could you stay silent for 5 minutes while being humiliated, trusting that justice would speak for you?" The studio went completely still. No one answered, but I think everyone asked themselves that question, because sometimes it only takes 5 minutes to humiliate someone and the same 5 minutes to teach the world what respect really means. The Ariane A900 touched down slowly on the runway in New York that quiet morning. The sky was a deep, tranquil blue as if it had never witnessed the storm it held just weeks earlier. The storm that would change modern aviation forever. No one spoke in the cabin, only the soft hum of the engines fading, and a strange kind of silence, not heavy, not forced. It felt like the quiet that follows a ceremony, when everyone knows they've just witnessed something greater than a scandal. When the wheels kiss the tarmac, a few passengers exchange glances. A middle-aged woman placed her hand over her heart. An elderly man nodded, then, almost in unison, applause began. Not loud, not prolonged, just steady, deliberate, each clap an acknowledgement from those who finally understood. I wasn't there. But when I watched the video passengers had filmed, I could almost feel the air in that cabin no longer divided by ticket class or privilege, but united by a shared realization justice had taken flight. Not through outrage, not through chaos, but through the calm intelligence and 5 minutes of stillness from one black woman who refused to be diminished. Dr. Aaliyah Carter stood up. She didn't look around, didn't smile in triumph. She simply nodded to a passenger who made room for her and walked down the aisle of first class, the same aisle where, weeks before, someone had told her, "You don't belong here." She left the plane not as a victim, but as a symbol of reform. No security detail, no entourage, just morning light touching the composed face of the woman who made an entire industry redefine what power means. A reporter near the tarmac called out, "Dr. Carter, one last word for America." She paused. Her voice was soft, needing no microphone, Yet it carried across the runway, justice doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes and a woman who refuses to be erased. No applause followed, no cheers, only eyes, hundreds of them following her, as if they'd just heard a modern prayer. That single line spread faster than any headline. It appeared on the Washington Post, lit up billboards in Times Square, and rippled across millions of social feeds. People etched it onto coffee mugs, wrote it into journals, whispered it to themselves, because they knew it wasn't a slogan. It was a way to live. A month later, Arian Air released a new in-flight video. No celebrities, no marketing glitz, just quiet moments, a flight attendant helping an elderly passenger buckle in, a steward offering water to a young black traveler, a pilot opening the cockpit so a little black girl could touch the controls. Then a calm voice, anonymous, spoke over soft music. In this sky, every human being deserves respect. Welcome aboard Arian Air, where dignity flies first. The first time I heard it, on a Boston-San Francisco flight, the cabin went silent. No chatter, just reflection. An older man beside me exhaled and said, "Now, that's the kind of justice I believe in, not the kind you shout about, but the kind you practice every day." I nodded, and I realized greatness doesn't always begin with protest or pain. Sometimes it begins with one calm act that forces everyone else to pause and see. A year later, PBS released a short documentary, 5 minutes that changed the sky. There were no reenactments, no dramatic music, just interviews with the people who helped truth survive: Daniel Park, Priya Mehta, Sofia Alvarez. Daniel said quietly, "I thought I was just filming a moment." Then I realized sometimes all it takes is one person who doesn't look away. Priya smiled faintly. We didn't code justice into the system. We just built a space where truth couldn't be deleted. And Sofia, the Latina lawyer whose calm voice had once echoed through the cabin, ended the film with this: "None of us saved Aaliyah. Aaliyah saved all of us from our own indifference." By then, people had come to understand justice doesn't need to shout, wasn't just a quote. It was a moral inheritance, a statement written in the stillness of courage, a lesson for a world too impatient to listen. Above the clouds, new Arian jets now carried a subtle silver arc painted on their tails, a faint glimmer of the moment that changed everything. Every time I see one trace the sky, I think of her words not as a slogan, but as a breath. Justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to last long enough for the world to listen. And sometimes, to make that happen, all it takes is one woman in simple clothes, boarding a plane with a first-class ticket, and refusing to let anyone else define her worth. And so, the story of Dr. Aaliyah Carter, the woman who chose wisdom over anger, comes to an end. Just 5 minutes of silence, yet enough to transform an entire system. It was never just a story about power or status, but a lesson on human dignity, something no one has the right to take away. Not even for a moment. If you've ever witnessed injustice, ever stayed silent out of fear, or been looked down upon simply for being different, remember this sometimes. Justice doesn't need to shout. It only needs someone brave enough to stand still long enough for the truth to speak on their behalf. Thank you to everyone who stayed with this story until the end. Every view, every comment, every share, you are part of the journey to carry these values farther. If you believe the world still needs more stories of respect, fairness, and humanity, please like, share, and subscribe so together we can keep telling stories about people, dignity, and the quiet light of wisdom. Because sometimes, just one story can change the way we see one another